Hey everyone, how we doing? Hang in there. So in 2006, I was dispatched to Ethiopia to respond to an ongoing drought, not unlike what they're experiencing now. And while there, I met this man and his family while I was driving across a parched landscape. And I was curious to know why he was there, so we stopped and we asked. And he proceeded to tell me how he had just walked for 14 days to this very spot because he was told that there was pasture here, only to find that this would be the place where his animals would soon die and his livelihood lost. And I've come to realize that the majority of African pastoralists get their information the same way. It's indigenous knowledge, word of mouth, and scouts. But unfortunately, these methods are becoming increasingly unreliable due to climate change. But 23,000 miles above them is a geostationary satellite, and it takes pictures every 15 minutes, and from those pictures derives something called normalized differential vegetation index, which is just a fancy way of saying photosynthesis. The challenge is, how do you get this information from space down to some of the most remote and hard to reach communities on the planet? That was a challenge that we wanted to try to solve. And so we had this idea. We had a group that had a great need that potentially technology could solve, and we wanted to develop some partnerships in order to solve it. And this was the beginning of that partnership. USAID, through their Development Innovations Ventures Office, was set up to fund these kinds of untested prototypes. They gave us $100,000 to test this idea. The World Food Program and the government of Ethiopia had just developed this early warning platform that synthesized satellite data and mapping, and it was developed by this small company. It was a company of one called Hope Spatial Solutions. But this platform really wasn't appropriate for pastoralists. It was made for policy decision makers. So we came together and we developed something new, a methodology for mapping out traditional grazing grounds, digitizing those maps, and overlaying it with NDVI, and then auto-generating those maps every 10 days. And this was the first product. This was the first community we were in, and this is a time-lapse video, and it's showing you the changes in this one area every 10 days. The map would be emailed to PCI, we would print it out, give it to local government officials, and there was a cascaded dissemination down to the community. Over the course of the dry season, we distributed what amounted to a ream of paper. It was one map for every 120 households. And the results were pretty remarkable. Almost 80% of the pastoralists were using those maps for migration decision-making, and more than half said it was their most important resource for migration decision-making. And what happened as a consequence was also remarkable. We saw herd mortality drop by 48%. The value of that reduced mortality was $5 million. That could be attributed. We couldn't find another source to attribute it to other than SAPARM. And for every dollar we invested in this project, we were yielding about $47 in value. And so based on this successful proof of concept, we expanded that partnership. Google had heard about what we were doing, and they wanted to invest their resources and expertise. We reached out to the University of Notre Dame to help set up a randomized control trial. And we expanded to Tanzania, where we're working with the Masai Mara. And then that partnership expanded even further as SNV, a Dutch organization working in Mali, and their partners wanted to use these maps as well, and the experience that we gained in Tanzania and Ethiopia. And here's just a sample of the maps that we're producing. They're auto-produced every 10 days, and they're being distributed to these communities. And it's giving these communities, for the very first time, a bird's-eye view of their traditional grazing lands and allowing them to have time to decide what to do and when to move their herds. But ultimately, we don't see the future of SAPARM as hand distribution of maps. We see it as this, an application that sits on a smartphone, that sits in the hands of the pastoralists in the field. By 2020, smartphone technologies is going to overtake feature phones on the continent. And in fact, in some of the areas, it's already happening. And we're working with pastoralists on their smartphones to receive these apps. Because ultimately, we see SAPARM as not a technology for a select few pastoralists, but there are 250 million pastoralists on the continent, and they're facing the same problem. And we believe that SAPARM can be one of the solutions, one of the enduring solutions to climate change that they're facing. So thanks very much.